Greetings, this is Kobe, the Nostalgic Catholic, with yet another Isaac Asimov short story review. This one is of a story called Sally. It's one of his robot stories. It even involves that these robots specifically have positronic brains. There's no direct reference to the three laws. In fact, strictly speaking, one of the robots in the story apparently seems to have not followed the three laws, violated the first law, albeit with a very strong justification. But still, that's not how robots are supposed to behave. Plus, remember, this is 1953, and 53, and the zeroth law is still, as an idea, is way in the future. So you can't say it was following a higher goal, even if arguably maybe it was. Well, let's talk about that. At least it does have his name on the cover. So that's, I guess, a little bit of progress. And the table of contents is the story. There we go. Sally by Isaac Asimov. Page 34. Now, we get some artwork with the story. Now, this is kind of nice. You have this facing page. You have these three guys. Alright. From the mustache, this is our main guy, Gellhorn. And these other two guys who seem to be running for their lives. He shows up with three of these, goons, basically. We see two of them there. That's kind of enough. And we see all these different cars. They're supposed to look kind of futuristic. This is 1953. I like the way the futuristic cars already seem like they ought to have fins on them. Fins don't really come along to a big degree till later on in the 1950s. Maybe 59 it hits the peak. But here in 53, several of these have noticeable peaks. Now they did something kind of unusual and distinct here. They put one of these cars, or a car like them, on the main page itself where the story begins. So it kind of like makes it a two-page story. This with the yellow, maybe that's supposed to be like roadways or something, and then just another car here. Maybe that's the one that's supposed to be Sally. Okay, because they've got these robotic cars. There's a fairly lengthy blurb here, and I'm going to read this in full since this is not part of it. Oh, and I just thought I'd note the artist signed his name here, and it also says there, illustrated by EMSH. So, alright, now I'll read the blurb, and it goes, with the highway slaughter mounting year after year, something pretty drastic must be done. Now remember, this is a time when cars were actually kind of fragile, kind of not terribly well designed in terms of what happens if it's in a crash. Seat belts, if available at all, were an option. And even if rumble seats were no longer being made, there were still lots of them around in older cars. And those things are known for, decapitating the people sitting in them in an accident. So, there was a lot of pretty dangerous things. And traffic laws were a little bit more crude in those days. Roads weren't as good. There's a lot of reasons why there should be probably more accidents than per capita. So, anyway, with the highway slaughter mounting year after year, something pretty drastic must be done. We can't suggest eliminating all automobiles. No government body would dare to legislate us back on our feet. That leaves but one answer: make cars more intelligent than their drivers. Sure, it can be done. Look at all these cybernetic brains they're using nowadays. Solve everything from your income tax to the number of molecules you can squeeze into a mustache cup. After a few minor adjustments, one of these mechanical minds could be installed to take over the operation of your Plymouth. Nothing to do but sit back and be driven to your destination without danger of being plowed into by some moron. Of course, there is one fly in the gas tank, so to speak. Suppose you let Isaac Asimov, we understand he never learned to drive, tell you about it in this unique story of the future rulers of the roads. Okay, so that's a lot of interesting commentary there. And apparently he hadn't yet learned to drive. Before a few more years would pass, he would finally bite the bullet, learn how to drive, and discover that he actually enjoyed it a great deal. And I don't know that he had any accidents or anything himself. He was probably a very careful driver. But the thing was, he kind of avoided that. Well, he spent most of his life in New York City or else in Boston. And, these big cities have very good public transportation systems. They really do. You can walk, nothing's all that far from anything. Or if it is, you take the subway, you take the elevated train, or you take the bus, or you take the monorail. I don't think they would have monorail. What else do they have? Or they might just have, well, back in those days, they would have had even Los Angeles, had the red car. You see that featured in the Roger Rabbit movie, and maybe another movie or something. So there's, they had all these different forms of transportation. San Francisco's still got its famous cable cars. Transportation is really good. You don't need to own a car if you live in a big city. Just take a train for further travel, right? Now, the downside, of course, is you can't go wherever the public transportation doesn't take you. Rail transportation will take you to the normal, suburban district. You may still have to walk a few blocks to the stop with the place where it stops, but from there to lots of places downtown to work, to shop, things like that. Coverage is quite good. It's when you want to do something else, like go off-road exploring and stuff like that. Even a regular car might not be enough. You really need like a four-wheeler and all that kind of stuff. So that gets into a whole other ball of worms I'm not going to talk about now. But at any rate, intelligent cars. Now we are in an age where, although there aren't Plymouths anymore, the brand seems to have quietly disappeared between then and now. There are these, intelligent driven cars, which is pretty, they're on the road now, and they don't need drivers. And they're pretty smart. And as far as I know, they've been either completely or very much accident-free. So that's a lot of things to say about all of that. But this is at a time where I guess it was thought that a positronic brain to a car would be very expensive and meant for very particular people or something like that. He kind of pictures it along the way. You see it briefly in one of his mentions where in the beginning they're so expensive that heads of state, mega multi-millionaires, and then they had an interesting provision: war veterans, injured war veterans, and others with physical disability. Now I can't picture them being rich or particularly necessarily accomplished. The likes of name fell out of my brain, but the guy who's the prominent physicist, write all those books, even though he's got cerebral palsy. I don't know why his name fell out of my brain, but anyway, different people, but just someone's got physical disabilities and they might be entitled to a car, maybe by some law. Well, as we get to the text of the story, most of it seems to be identical. There's one rather odd exception. I'm going to read the paragraph in its original form and the other. I can't say I've checked the whole thing, paragraph for paragraph, to be absolutely identical, but up to this point and a bit further, this is the only difference I found. And here's what we have. It says, we take it all for granted now. You see, we have a history of how all this happened. In the automatics, there were problems. People would get hurt on the roads. They had to chauffeur dead lumps of machines. That's how they described the regular cars as they existed in 1953. And for the most part, that's how most cars are even now. Okay. Finally, we get a paragraph that says, we take it all for granted now, but I can remember the days when the first laws came out forcing the old machines off the highways and limiting travel to automatics. Lord, what a fuzz! They called it everything from communism to fascism, but it emptied the highways and stopped the killing, and still more people get around more easily the new way. Okay. Fuzz. Yeah. Is that like the fuzzy wuzzy was a bear kind of fuzz? Or is that maybe that's like, well, I remember they used to say that in the 1960s. They had that as a name for whole things, the police. Oh, the fuzz is coming. Get out of here. That's what they said. Now, in the new one, it starts with, we take it for granted now. No, we can't take it. But I can remember, the first laws came out forcing the old machines off the highways and limiting travel to automatics. Lord, what a fuss. That makes more sense, actually. They called it everything from communism to fascism, but it emptied the highways and stopped the killing, and still more people get around more easily the new way. This, by the way, the story got reprinted in Nightfall and Other Stories. It may have been reprinted elsewhere in other places, but that's the one other main place. The first place it got collected. So, anyway, we get now to the story itself. In the story, the guy visits these robotic cars. Well, first let's start. Who is this guy that we're talking about that runs the place? Well, he originally had been a chauffeur for a very rich guy. Then the rich guy, being rich, is able to get one of the first of these fairly new, what they call automatics, which is to say a self-driving car. I mean, they had automatic transmissions. Why not have automatics that automatically completely drive themselves? So you can kind of see the transition. And he was rich enough to be able to afford one, so he bought it. A 15, presumably a 2015 model year Mat-O-Mot. Okay, I guess in the 50s that seems like a reasonable name. For which reason that car would later come to be nicknamed Matthew. Mat-O-Mot self-drives, but the rich guy wanted the chauffeur at the wheel just in case. So that's what he did. And he became very attached to his to the car because it was his job to take care of it, to keep it fueled and primed and polished and clean and very nice and so forth. So that's what he was doing, and it was like he kind of came to love the car itself. The old rich guy, who probably didn't seem to have another friend in the world, I guess whatever why, basically decided to set up a trust to take care of that car and other cars that are basically retired. So it's like a retirement plan for robots, robotic cars anyway. And so as we meet him in this story, he's got this huge park with some 51 old retired positronic brain cars. One of those cars is a cute little convertible named Sally. I guess that's the one portrayed on the cover on the story page there. And Sally, apparently the convertibles are female, the sedans are male, and there's a cute little joke. I think it somewhat succeeds at humor, at least I think it did, wherein the visiting person says, "Oh, and do they park them in separate garages?" I don't know, maybe some of them are going together, but all that's neither here nor there. But anyway, these cars seem to have personality. Apparently a positronic brain, even though it's artificial. And supposedly would have the 3 laws. They don't mention the 3 robotic laws. But we now introduce another character by the name of Mr. Gellhorn. I pointed him out a little bit. He's got a little mustache. Looks every bit the villain, and actually is, which he treats that like that's a surprise that somebody who looks like a stereotypical villain should in fact prove to be villainous. Anyway, the villain comes to this place with an offer, and he says, "Tell you what, we can make some money here. How about you take the engines out of some of these, because that's what makes them so expensive. The engine and the positronic brain are very interwoven with each other. You gotta take that as a package, and we can sell these to other car bodies. I've got a manufacturer lined up who can provide the car bodies. And we just put these engines in there, and we'll get more mileage out of this. We could sell these for so much, and it'd be a lot of money, and that would be make a real profit. And of course, the guy just says, "That is ridiculous. I'm not interested in your offer. Now get the hell off my property. I don't want to talk to you again." And the guy says, "Okay, I'll leave." And he comes back with a few of his henchmen, two of which we see in the drawing, and another vehicle, a great big bus that appears to be the sort of result of what he did. It was a bus into which body one of these intelligent engines had been transplanted very clumsily. And this bus is actually communicated to with the other cars, on the other cars. And time begins kind of to cooperate with them. And suddenly, even though Mr. Gellhorn tries to put it in a manual mode where you override its positronic brain, now you just have a regular car's engine, so to speak, except its mind is still in there, cut off from being allowed to do anything. And something about the way he installed it amounted to, it's like, this bus is suffering. Or the engine in it is suffering. You get down to machine suffering. Oh boy, okay. I guess that's how personal these things get. So you come along, and the guy Mr. Gellhorn and crew decide to steal these cars against the will. He says, "Look, either you do this, and you can do it right and choose just 25 cars to pull the engines out of, your choice, or I'm going to do it, but me and my henchmen are going to do it, probably ruining a few of them, starting with Sally, and we're going to get our 25, even if it means destroying all of them." So that's what they do. That's what they're trying to do. And he says, "Well, you don't have any fences or guards or anything else on your property." "Well, I don't really need that. And I warn you, you need to get off the property. I told you have to go." And the police will be on their way too, by the way. But we don't care about that. We're going to come and steal these cars if you won't sell them to us. I mean, we got these auto body guys all lined up, ready to go. And, they're just waiting for us to provide the positronic motors. So he says, "Well, okay, we're going to go out there, and then you're going to see." And the cars, they're intelligent, remember? They see what's going on. They understand. And you know that. And they're going to protect themselves. And they end up running Mr. Gellhorn and his henchmen right off the property, for one thing. And even get that bus with a stolen engine in it to cooperate, and even override its manual control somehow. If you don't install it right, it could still find ways if it's motivated enough. And it's already suffering. And now, just through talking to the other cars here, and Mr. Gellhorn in his anger was going to drive it directly into Sally. And by the time we get to that point, the engine of the bus, despite being in manual mode, somehow manages to get it to stop before it actually hits Sally. So, next thing you know, Gellhorn has been chased away. It ends very unusual because it's one of those things where you want a victory and you're kind of rooting for these cars, even though you could construe the whole thing as a bit of a waste of fuel. Their engines continuously run, which means that's how they're continuously wait. You shut them off. It's like you turn the robot off. It's like you kill a person, except I don't know if it's really killed. You can just turn it right back on and they're right back up again. I mean, would it be killing to put a person under, like for surgery? I don't know. Some of these things, but maybe a robotic car doesn't like to be turned on. You turn it on, it has to figure out where it is, who it is, and everything all over again. So maybe that could be inconvenient at least. So, they hadn't been turned off, but Mr. Gellhorn wants to do that too. So, and does actually turn, of all cars, he actually manages to turn Sally off. Okay, so there's more little details in there. But the best part is you get to the end, you're rooting for the cars to win. They win, and it turns out that bus chased Mr. Gellhorn and chased him probably on foot, clear to some whole other city, and then ran over him. And of course, there's no room to deny that the guy was, absolutely deserved it, and they should do that. And that he had really been horrible to this robotic engine and so forth, and was trying to be horrible to all these other cars. That still doesn't, justify a violation of the first law. And so the guy says, I'm not quite so fond of my cars anymore. Maybe time will come; they'll be the ones in charge, and either we won't be kept around, or we'll only be kept around if we can be useful in keeping them fueled and cleaned and all those other things, fixed and so forth. So it's kind of a fun sort of story where you root for the victory. I think the only other one I've seen like that was a rather whimsical movie called Serial Mom, where this lady, and played by Kathleen Turner, even, so you kind of, automatically want to root for her. I mean, she's got this sympathetic voice, but can be, I don't know, anyway, the voice of Jessica Rabbit for another, Who Framed Roger Rabbit reference in the same review. But she has this habit of killing people for some of the most ridiculous and incidental reasons. Like wearing white shoes after Labor Day kind of stuff, So you're kind of rooting for her. She goes to trial, and you're actually kind of rooting for her to get off. And she does. And it's like, why did we want that? And this story kind of does the same. We're rooting for the cars to win out against evil Mr. Gellhorn, and they do. And now we're kind of like, maybe I'm not so comfortable around them anymore. It's a pretty clever story, well written, and he's definitely coming into the top of his form and shows just the writing style, despite some of the odd aspects of this thing, of this sort of scenario. But since self-driving cars are actually in the verge of somewhat becoming a reality, even now, and monster laws that just suddenly step in and say no human-driven cars on the roads anymore. Oh my! I don't know. Even though these heavy-handed, governmental policies, sound a little bit frightening. How would you get the people to go along with that? I mean, even talking about road fatalities, I don't know how you're going to justify that. So, I'm going to leave it at that. As you can see, the story actually raises lots of fascinating things to think about, or talk about. Anyway, thank you for listening.